The content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. What's happening, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla Channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Now, you know, before I get things started, I have to give a shout out to all of the members of the Green Gorilla Channel. So let's do that right now. Yes, I'd like to give a shout out to Jones Boy, Ryan Jackson, The Face, Mr. Heat, David the Man, Afro Analyst, NEU, Ronan Martin, Black Quizzard, ADOS, Camp Low, Isa Abdul Sahir, Anthony Taylor, Deshaun Nolly, Ab Media, Aaron Lloyd, Leroy Honeycutt, MLR, Julius Ferguson, Charles Rogers, Black Dog, Brother Love, Infamous Chillin', Randall, Universal 178, Black Swerve 404, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, The Walt Diddy Show, DH, C-Truth the Revelator, Gold Professor, The Nameless Protagonist, Black Pill Ned Stark, Arthur Unknown, Odd Collard, Roderick Jackson, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Brian Williams, Kalan Jakala, Sherrod Martin, Ricky Dawson, Cedric Bowman, True 7360, BK Born Shaheed, James Washington, Hostile Adept, Seven Coast Dojo, Shop Talk Live, WPR 1, Rogish the Billmonger, I Care, Forrest Windu, Lady Mistine Green, BGS Ibmore, and Marvin Battle Jr. Thank you so much for being members of the Green Gorilla Channel. Thank you. Thank you for being members of the Green Gorilla Channel. And you too can become a member of the Green Gorilla Channel. And here's how. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla Channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla Channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla Channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. Yes, so we're back. Of course, I am the G with a PhD. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla Channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. And for those who are just now joining, I want to issue a reminder. The content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. So now that that is out of the way, I want to get into the proceedings this evening. But before I do that, I'd like to give a special shout out to Vernon King. Thank you so much for the donation, sir. I really appreciate that. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to Forrest Windu. Let's get some. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your kind donation. I appreciate that. And make sure, if you can, please donate to the Green Gorilla Channel. If you enjoy the content and if you like the analysis, make sure to make a contribution. But having said that, I want to get into the proceedings. What I want to talk about today is why black conservatives, liberals, Afro-Centrics, black clergy members, and the black intelligentsia keep failing the black community. So, in other words, what I want to do is have a conversation about the black misleadership class, if you want to call it that. Okay? Now, again, I've already stated what the black misleadership class consists in. it consists in, again, black liberals, black conservatives, Afro-Centrics, the black church, and black intellectuals. Okay? And thank you so much, sir, Charles Faulkner Jr., for the contribution. So what I want to do is try to address how to resolve the crisis of black leadership by arming would-be, could be, new black social critics or black cultural representatives with a new method. Now, my method is a naturalistic and a disclosive method. It's based on philosophy. I can't give you that today, but what I can do is begin to have a conversation about what my method is not. Ultimately, what I'm trying to get people to do is to avoid fruitless discourses. I'm trying to get people to abandon moral, political, and philosophical dogmatism. Now, the method that I come up with, I think, will help the black social critics of today think about new ways of undermining unfair and restrictive conventions, structures, systems that favor the most advantaged members of society. Now, I think such work is necessary if new black leaders, new black social critics, new black cultural avant-garde thinkers, right, are going to bring about any substantive change in the plight of African Americans. They have to adopt a new point of view. So what I'm going to do is highlight several tropes that stifle innovation from black leaders or black social critics. And maybe tomorrow I will sketch out or adumbrate a more naturalistic and a disclosive approach to black social criticism. But for now, I just want to stick to highlighting the several tropes that I think stifle innovation from black social critics. Okay? Now, I've already told you who the principal players are. I've already given you insight into that by means of the list that you see presented on your screen here. Okay? Now, let me get out of that there. Okay? But I want to move to focus on black liberals right now. Okay? I want to talk about black liberals. Now, the best place to start is with them because it's one of the chief discourses, it's the chief political perspective of black people in the black community. And a whole host of black social critics utilize it in order to handle black people's problems. Okay? And it's basically popular political liberalism, right? Now, as far as I'm concerned, the main problems associated with popular political liberalism is it overemphasizes what I call the logic of distribution. It endorses the establishment of piecemeal, like little ticky-tacky, a little bit at a time, right? Social engineering programs or social transfer programs. And it uses an antiquated civil rights strategy in order to deal with contemporary black problems, okay? Now, let's talk about the logic of distribution. Sure, I'm willing to admit, right? Social justice depends on a fair scheme of distribution. It does. I will not deny that. But it is wrong. It's erroneous. It's misleading to reduce social justice to mere distribution. Now, Of course, I can't blame Trump on this, but I can blame Obama on this. Okay? Because Obama was a president who overemphasized the evils of plutocracy, although he himself, to me, kowtowed to plutocrats. And plutocracy is just a fancy way of saying the rich, right? Ruled by the rich. But when you start to overemphasize, anyway, plutocracy, what it leads you to do is to overemphasize or to highlight amounts of things to be distributed. Most often is you're talking about jobs and resources. Now, I'm not saying that people don't need jobs and resources. They do. You do need jobs and resources, and more people need them. But see, you don't want to get into a conversation of overemphasizing amounts of things to be distributed, but rather what you would like to do is to provide a substantive examination of the scheme of distribution itself and to offer a positive and a practical program for deep and paradigmatic change in distribution, not merely the shuffling around of chairs in a musical chairs game. That's not solving the problem. Okay? Now, instead of actually providing a paradigmatic kind of change, most liberals, all they do is they follow the logic of the distributive paradigm and they offer mitigative or what I call tactical change. It's not really substantive at all. Not at all. So by advocating policies designed to relieve the financial stresses experienced by a shrinking middle class, which is typically how these so-called changes are supposed to be made. Oh, well, let's expand the middle class. Or they'll do something along these lines. Well, let's pass legislation designed to guarantee that women get the same pay as men in the workplace. Now, I mean, what you get is this surface level presentation of you doing something in order to make sure that more people are able to receive their share of the pie. But you don't really change the way the pie is cut and is sliced. And that's the problem. And so they put on this surface or this superficial face, and they act as if they are committed to upholding distributive justice. But what they also do is they do this at the cost of underemphasizing what I consider to be more insidious forms of structural domination and oppression. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean that the shortcomings of the distributive paradigm can basically be spelled out by looking at the distributive paradigm when you extend it to non-material things. Because you can't go around and distribute power. You can't distribute opportunity like money. You can't distribute respect. And the logic of distribution tends to refer to power, opportunity, and respect as things that are static. Things that like you could just hand out. When in fact, power, opportunity, and respect are the product of social relationships. They're not things you could just hand out like government cheese. They're the product of social relationships. So that's problematic. We have to think beyond the logic of distribution. Another thing that black liberals do is they continue to uncritically support what I call transfer programs. And what do I mean by this? I mean paternalistic programs that socially engineer black people's lives, like Section 8, temporary assistance for needy families, the child health insurance program. All of these programs are basically administered by governmental bureaucracies that are arranged in a top-down fashion. And they basically rely on instrumental thinking in setting out and achieving objectives. So you got a group of people who are elite in these bureaucracies, and they know what people are supposed to get and how they're supposed to behave in order to receive the Section 8, the temporary assistance of needy families, and the child health insurance program. And by the way, I must say, these things are primarily given to women. And that's another problem. But beyond that, I'm not trying to get rid of these programs, but I would also like to say, if you're going to have these programs, don't just give them to one segment of the population. Make sure that everyone who needs them has access to them. And then not only that, if you're going to have these kind of bureaucracies, you have to constrain them. You have to make them more compatible with what I call horizontal or egalitarian or participative democratic ideals. When you go to apply for Section 8 or for temporary assistance for needy families, which is the EBT card, or child health insurance programs for your children, you don't need to be dictated to by some bureaucrat and to be looked down upon like a child. These programs need to be adaptable, and they need to meet and address the needs of the people who actually need the assistance. So they need to be more democratic. And then I say, look, as long as we continue to support these programs while not also supporting their renewal, their periodic evaluation and revision through democracy, through public input, basically all they're going to do is encourage paternalism and dependency. And we don't need dependency perpetually. At some point, we need to be able to get out of it. So that's another problem with liberalism or popular political liberalism. But most importantly, and this is the biggest issue, black liberals are ineffective to the extent that they utilize antiquated civil rights strategies to grapple with problems that are currently facing the African American community. I mean, we've just saw a recent display of this with Black Lives Matter. Fighting racism with marches, walks, sit-ins, and all kinds of destructiveness, it was okay in an era in which blacks were actually restricted from occupying public spaces. But that's no longer the case. The movement called the Civil Rights Movement removed these restrictions. And for the most part, I can't say all the way, but for the most part, it has eliminated overt racism. Now, we know racism is still there, but it's not overt. So there's nobody out there who is smart, who's a racist, calling black people the N-word. They're not going to be ostentatiously racist. Okay? So, in other words, The civil rights movement has lost its potency. And the strategies related to the civil rights movement, they've lost their potency. So doing that stuff is not going to actually move the needle towards progress the way that it did before. Now, I will say, you can get people's attention by occupying the streets. You can. But what then? What then? What comes after that? And we know movements can be easily co-opted, but that's a whole nother conversation. All I want to do is just highlight racism is covert now. It's underneath the table. And to some extent, and this is just an argument, I don't believe it is, but some people say that racism could be unconscious, unintentional, subconscious, implicit, things like that. But due to the fact that racism is more covert, black social critics have to be able to think from different perspectives and use different tactical strategies for black social reform. So, in other words, what we can't do is fight against racist straw men. But what we have to do is expose and attack complex, systemic, and relational forms of oppression and domination. Now, it's going to be a hard sell, but black people have to understand. And this is just my view, you might disagree with it. We should be fighting against not racism per se, in and of itself, but against all forms of relational oppression and domination, especially those forms of oppression and domination that impact blacks' lives disproportionately. But they also affect many other groups as well. It's going to be very difficult for black people to convince white folks that, oh, well, just I want something for me, me. Just for me, me. For me and me and me. You got to make it seem as if it's advantageous to them as well. Is what I'm aiming at here. So anyway, black liberals are problematic. Okay? So again, to sum it up, the logic of distribution, the uncritical support of transfer programs, civil rights tropism, they all hinder progress towards democratic functioning. And they hinder it because they don't push towards the expansion of democratic powers and the creation of institutions that might enhance democratic inclusion for black folks. And they don't seem to offer much help or much promise in fostering black self-development and self-determination. And this is why now I want to turn to black conservatives who claim to support a program that does just that. Now I call black conservatives modern philosophical liberals because I don't see any delineation between classical liberalism philosophically and black conservatism or popular conservatism at all. I don't see the difference between the two. Okay? And I don't know if you know any black conservatives. I know a few. I can rattle off a few. Thomas Sowell is one. Walter Williams is another. Shelby Steele, Michael Steele, John McWhorter. They're all black conservatives, okay? Now, what black conservatism does is it basically outlines a path to black success based upon seizing free market opportunities, governmental non-interference, and intense self-help strategies. Now, what I want to show is that black conservatives are just as stagnant as their liberal counterparts in securing a path to democratic inclusion and freedom for African Americans. Why? Because they fail to acknowledge structural and relational sources of domination and oppression. They rely uncritically on metaphysical assumptions developed from modernity. I'm talking about who people are, how people exist, what their moral value or worth is, and how to determine it. And they also make sophomoric or simplistic allusions to classical economic theory to define success in the good life. And also what they do is they endorse what I would perceive to be a one-sided view of government interference that leads them to make, again, these superficial arguments about where the government should poke its nose in and where it shouldn't. One-sided. And I'll get back to that point. But those are the general points, okay? So the first thing, they basically de-emphasize or ignore structural oppression and domination because they tend to view power relationships as dyadic. And what that means is in twos. Twos. So in their view, the post-civil rights era, it was one in which, the white-black master-slave dynamic was dissolved. And so this ushered in an age of opportunity for hardworking black folks. If blacks fail to succeed, they can't any longer point to hostile white oppressors as the source of their misfortune, but they have to turn inward and examine their own shortcomings. But the dyadic view of power causes black conservatives to overlook the fact that power relationships are not always defined in these easily identifiable and deliberately calculated ways. Black, white, rich, poor, educated, uneducated, the bourgeoisie, the proletariat. So what do I mean by this? I mean, new black social critics must be aware of the effects of structural and relational domination and oppression and how indirect and unintended social behavior can have a negative impact on the self-determination and self-development of the members of the black community. And some people might not get that, but I'll come back to it so that you will in the long run. A different problem with black conservatives is they tend to overemphasize personal responsibility. And we heard, there was some guy who came into my comment section and made a proclamation about personal responsibility just the other day. And I had to go off on him. And I did. Yeah, you call it what you want to, but I went off on him. Okay? But you hear this a lot. Black people need to be personally responsible. You need to be responsible, personally responsible. And I say that they emphasize personal responsibility and individualism because they have blind acceptance of metaphysical assumptions developed in modernity. Now, I don't know if you know anything about modern philosophy, but modern philosophy, they say, began with Descartes, René Descartes, who issued in the proclamation, I think, therefore I am. Ergo cogito sum. I think, therefore I am. This was the starting point at which you are the center of everything and everything comes from you, the subject, the I, the ego. You know you are, but everything outside of you can be doubted. You start with the subject first. You center the subject first. The world was never orchestrated in this way until this modern philosophical concept. Even in different countries around the world, there still is no overemphasis on the I, the subject, the ego, starting with me first. I want, me. It's a Western thing. So ultimately, modernity basically frames the self as prior to, ontologically, as a matter of being, before social arrangements and associated activity. I know this is a lot to take in, but I'm giving it to you because you need to get it. There's something that they created called the state of nature, a concept, a counterfactual claim, in order to make a moral and political argument about why human beings have rights against the government, against other human beings, and a right to what their agency is able to help them procure from nature. I say it's a bunch of bullshit if you ask me. Rights. There's no such thing as rights. It's a construct. It's an ideal born out of modernity, born out of white men who wanted to throw off the yoke of the divine right of kings and ecclesiastical authority after the Dark Ages. They were like, okay, fuck the king, fuck the church. I'm doing my own thing. That's what this is about. And it only worked for them because they didn't give anybody else any rights at all. And they still don't really observe other people's rights. But I'm digressing. So one of the assumptions is that human beings exist prior to social arrangements and associated activity. So therefore, the assumption is that the individual is self-reliant, he's autonomous, personally responsible, endowed with the ability to unilaterally carve out a unique and an authentically distinct moral life apart from anybody else. But look, I'm not the first person to say this. Many philosophers have basically argued that this metaphysical depiction of the subject, the I, the ego, is misleading. Yeah, okay, yeah, it's true. Singular, like take for example, yourself. You do think, and you think by yourself. You do. You eat, and what you eat don't make me shit. Oh, I get that. You want, and you want what you want. And when you make decisions, you are making the decisions. True enough, okay? I'll grant you that. True that. I grant you all that. But while singular beings, while you think, what you want, and what you decide, what you strive for, the content of your beliefs and the things that you desire, or a subject matter provided by association. What you want the PS5 for? What you want the Jordans for? What you want the nice whip for? What you want it for? It is because there is a social world in which such things have value. Otherwise, why would you want them? It wouldn't be a need for you to want them. If you live on an island by yourself, these things wouldn't be important to you at all. The things you want, the things you even think about, don't come into your awareness without a social context, is what I'm trying to argue for. I want to be a real estate agent. For what? Or I want to be a doctor. What you want to be is provided. Well, it takes on meaning within the context of a social world, is what I'm trying to argue. So anyway, the point is that new black social critics should understand that viewing the subject as ontologically separate from and prior to social relations obscures the ways that social structures and relationships affect and effect blacks' identities and opportunities. In other words, black social critics, they have to be aware that extreme subjectivism advocated by conservatives is counterfactual. And that oppression and domination encountered by members of the African American community, especially men, is tangible. It's not something that they're imagining. It's not something that they're making an excuse for. They're experiencing it. And the last thing I want to say about, well, not the last thing, it's actually the third thing. Anyway, black conservatives make this superficial use of market ideology. And they point to wealth building as a tool through which blacks can achieve the good life. Again, I said, earlier, black conservatives view power relations as dyadic: white, black, rich, poor, educated, uneducated. And in particular, they basically view the white power dynamic as one that was dissolved by the civil rights movement. So black conservatives perceive the plight of African Americans not as a racial problem, but more as an economic problem. So all you got to do is arm yourself with the precepts of neoclassical economic theory and get yourself a subjectively, I can do it attitude. And then you all of a sudden encourage African Americans to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But as far as I'm concerned, all this thinking is, this call for economic development and empowerment, it's another variation of the distributive paradigm. And I said before, you need distribution. But what kind of distribution? Just switching the chairs around? Or do you need a deep paradigmatic change in the way things are distributed in this country? So instead of ensuring the resources and fair background conditions are met by governmental policy, black conservatives encourage blacks to get the resources for themselves. But the distributive paradigm, whether it's working for the liberals or the conservatives, it doesn't account for the development of certain powers, certain capacities that increase the ability of competent democratic functioning. I mean, what's the use of having a whole bunch of money when your desires and insights are not reflected in your proximate social and political environment? I mean, it's a whole bunch of rappers that are rich as a motherfucker. They're still dysfunctional. You can give a fucker who doesn't have a proper moral and a proper cultural education a shitload of cash, and he's still not going to be able to do what's necessary in order to keep it and to grow it. And this leads to my last point. So black conservatives, just like their white counterparts, they promote a policy of free market non-interference. And I think it's one-sided, because the policy of government non-interference is basically promoted by the idea of negative liberty, which basically says, okay, the government is a powerful entity that can impinge upon or restrict your freedom. And this is a serious concern. I mean, yeah, you're right, black conservative. Citizens should be aware of the potential abuses of government policy and government officials. We should. But that whole idea is one-sided when it concerns itself only with the interference of the government, while ignoring a whole host of ways that powerful individuals, powerful institutions, and corporations can interfere with people. So it ain't just the government who can interfere with people. You got non-governmental organizations that interfere with people. You got corporations that interfere with people. And you got wealthy and powerful people that interfere with people. So it can't just be the government that needs to be the culprit here when you start talking about interference. So I say it's absurd to demonize one kind of impingement of freedom without acknowledging the other kinds. And again, negative liberty is useless to the extent that the people who have it can't really actually exercise it. What's the point of having a power or a certain liberty or a freedom and you can't exercise it? There is none. So that's pretty abstract, pretty difficult to get. But what I want to do is take a quick break, give you a mental break, and I'm gonna come back in. With, the rest is not as abstract as this. The rest is pretty much clear cut. But I'm gonna get back to the Afro-Centrics. Then I'm gonna get to the black church. Then I'm gonna get to black intellectuals. Then I'm gonna be up out of here. So quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get to the rest of it. We're almost halfway through it. The content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. Okay, so the next thing to talk about, we've already talked about liberals, we talked about conservatives. It's time to talk about Afro-Centrics. Now, some people think they know what my viewpoint on this is, but you're about to get all of it tonight. Because I am a Pan-Africanist, but I'm not a naive Pan-Africanist. I'm not. And you'll understand why as I explain it to you in my own words for a change, without being interrupted and being told that it's never worked. It can't work. Here's what I say about Afro-Centrics. Okay, so basically I call Afro-Centrics black classical romanticists. You know, that's what I call them. Black classical romanticists. So they seek to derive self-esteem for blacks from the explorations and the understanding of the achievements of ancient black civilizations. And look, I'll be the first to admit, there is a lack of culturally neutral scholarship regarding the ancients in general, black ancients. But there's two reasons why new black social critics should not get caught into this trap. First of all, black classical romanticism advocates impractical and anachronistic strategies for black improvement. Anachronistic, meaning what happened then and what was going on then is not going to work right now. Second, black classical romanticism supports a counterfactual black essentialism and a counterfactual black solidarity. And I think many of you have made this claim to me as well. And I understand that. I've been understanding that. So let me state this before I even move forward. Look, I understand cultural imperialism, racism. No, it can be debilitating to people of color in America and other Western societies. I mean, to be labeled the other, black, to be stigmatized and ostracized for looking, talking, walking differently than the members of the dominant culture, it can be draining emotionally. It can be physically exhausting. Even shit, it can be life endangering. But when Afrocentric scholars infer that black people can make their situation better by adopting the names, the dress, the ritual customs of ancient or contemporary African cultures, they're playing a deceptive game. I mean, let's face it. This is an inconvenient truth. Most African Americans are a hybridized people. Hybridized people. most African Americans are a hybridized people. Meaning, African Americans are not purely descended from Africans. But as the label suggests, African American, they're both African and American, but primarily and culturally American. Changing your name, your clothing, adopting unfamiliar customs and rituals do not bring one closer to democratic functioning. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, it will cut you off from democratic functioning through self-imposed ostracization and through challenging the dominant culture in inauthentic ways. What do I mean by that? It means you're going to take what the dominant culture deems deviant and amplify and stretch it so that it aggravates the members of the dominant culture even more. Now, some people will disagree with me when I say this, be upset at me. Because, but think about it. If you're going to use this strategy, to me, it's perplexing. Because this authentic culture that you're taking on to protect yourself against white rejection is more alien to you than the dominant culture that you want to shield yourself from. What do you know about this other culture? You don't know shit about it, to be quite honest. Or what you do know, you know tangentially and superficially. Now, I say, look, despite the harmful effects of marginalization and cultural imperialism, blacks have had a profound impact and influence on American culture. That influence should continue. Now, even though white people act like it's their country, it ain't just their country. It's a black, red, yellow country just as much as it is a white country. So you shouldn't hide behind a false identity by adopting the customs and rituals of an idealized African culture. All that is a sign of exasperation and weariness. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't fight against cultural imperialism. We should. But you have to do it authentically. You can't do it by all of a sudden wearing dashikis and then changing your name and then all of a sudden, comporting yourself differently. That's not going to make it. That's not going to change things. You have to be authentic in your self-expression and your democratic inclusion. And reaching for another culture is not going to make that happen. And the last issue I have with black classical romanticism, Afro-Centricism, is that it calls for an unrealistic black essentialism and a solidarity. And yeah, we do need to be together to some degree, but the kind of consensus that we call for is unattainable. It can't be achieved. There is no homogeneous black community. There is no such thing. So you shouldn't become stupefied when you fail to reach an idealistic and a fantastical black solidarity. Consensus is hard to reach even within small groups. When you got a strong sense of connectivity stemming from mutually shared values and beliefs. For example, your family, your church congregation, your fraternal organization. So your aim should not be to reach an ever elusive consensus, but to generate a critical black public that receives input from a variety of important sources. The fact is this, and it's an empirical fact, man. Blacks comprise a heterogeneous group. And there are members of the black community who have competing claims of interest. It is what it is. You shouldn't bracket off these interests in order to attain a false consensus or a sense of solidarity. But you have to deliberate with one another in order to devise a more legitimate and a practical black agenda. You had to have conversations. You have to reach compromises. You have to actually engage in democratic activity. So to sum it up, Afrocentric philosophy is best when it challenges ways of thinking and ways of perceiving reality that engender domination and oppression for black folks. It's good. I like the epistemology of Afrocentricism. I like some of the ontology of it. But it gets worse when it tells black people that they need to adopt the practices of ancient black culture and when it demands a romantic black solidarity. You're not going to be able to get that. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Afrocentricism is at its worst when you got crackpot Afrocentricists who basically come up with alien theories and shit. Yeah, I don't know if you have ever been exposed to some of this stuff, but it's out there, okay? It's out of space shit. Or when you start talking about supernatural esoterica, or you start talking about how your melanin, your pineal can get you into contact with dark matter or some shit like that. Like, come on, man. We got to deal with reality. Afrocentric philosophers should be working with all of the members of the black community in order and deliberating with them to figure out what the community needs. Not trying to make them be what they can't be by fiat. So that's it for the black Afrocentrics. I don't know if I pissed you off, but it is what it is. I see a lot of comments coming in, but I haven't been keeping up with them because I got my head buried in what I'm talking about. Okay. Now we come to the black church. This is an institution, man. It's problematic. It stifles black innovation and progress. It does, the black church. Now, I'll say this. At one time, the black church was the backbone of the black community. Even though it was flawed in a variety of different ways, it was. Not black women. It was the church that was the backbone of the black community. And it undergirded most of its activities in both public and private life. This is the facts. If anybody would like to, claim otherwise, where the fuck did black people congregate and come together and make decisions about their collective improvement other than the black church prior to the civil rights movement? Where did they do it? Where? I'll wait. Explain to me where. If you can do that, I'll be waiting. But currently, the black church, it has not been able to offer any prophetic vision at all. And we need it. I mean, look, we got widespread incarceration, depression-like unemployment rates, teenage pregnancy, severe poverty. They are overwhelming the black community, and the black church has no practical answer. And I say it's due to two factors. First, the black church is no longer at the center of black life at all. During slavery and directly thereafter, the black church actually was the physical embodiment of the black public sphere. You don't know about this, so I don't know if I should go into it, but in Europe, they had things called salons. And in the salons, you would have members of the aristocracy and members of the general public come together and talk about philosophy, science, politics, without any restrictions. The same kind of thing happened in the black church. It was the black public sphere. It was the meeting place. Today, though, man, you got competing religious faiths. You got secular institutions that a good portion of the black community are attracted to. So, to be perfectly honest, the black church, it's on the periphery of black people's lives, especially intelligent and socially conscientious black folks. So it's no longer, again, the central meeting place, and it's too fractured and splintered to create any solid channeling of black interest and power. And also, secondly, the black church is basically lost its moral power. Too many scandals. Too many preachers are basically charlatans. I call the shit preacher pimping. They're enjoying the spoils of sex and money pilfered from their congregations. I mean, you got motherfuckers like Creflo Dollar. How the fuck are you going to listen to a man named Creflo Dollar and expect to get some spiritual uplifting from a man like that? I'm just asking the question. You got literally motherfuckers in the church dancing on money. But I don't want to get too far off into it, man. I'm just saying, okay? So, look, the black church is a mockery of its former self. And you got these big-ass, profit-driven mega churches. The pastors, they can't possibly develop personal relationships with the members of their flock. It's impossible. If you got a big-ass mega church, how you going to know who the people are and how to help them and provide counsel and advice? All you can do is entrance the people with loud music and shouting and shit, which is what the church is now. People go there to get an ecstatic trance for 2 hours, and then they go home and they feel good. Then they do the same shit they was doing all week before they go back to church. There's no cohesion. And this brings me to my last problematic group, black intellectuals. The black intelligentsia. And one could argue, okay, you're part of this class. So why would you dare denounce them? Well, because I see problems within them. So you got liberals, conservatives, Afro-Centrics, the church. They are not able to rouse the black public in any meaningful and significant way since the civil rights movement. So this leaves open the possibility that you can, get black intellectuals to be catalysts for change and improvement in conditions for the members of the black community. But when you critically examine the behavior and the body of work of contemporary black intellectuals, it's not hard to see why the black community is not hearkening their messaging. I mean, all too often black intellectuals keep too much critical distance from the black community to be effective, or they succumb to commercial interests that supersede substantive research or the spearheading of new social movements. I'm going to talk about the first thing first. Too much critical distance from the black community to be effective. So like when you're an intellectual, man, you can, and I'm guilty of this shit myself, you can become so specialized to the extent to which the language you use to describe justice and injustice is too technical. You can separate yourself from your audience, from black folks, in a way that renders your message just absolutely ineffective. So that's the reason why, man, intellectuals should be careful. They should be aware of the critical distance they have in relation to the people they're trying to seek to influence and to guide. If they get too far detached from the ordinary experiences of the black community, as do many black academicians and professionals, they run the risk of offering prescriptions that basically, they're incomprehensible. Motherfuckers are like, what the fuck are y'all talking about? What is this shit y'all saying? It's alienating. Y'all become people who live in ivory towers and you're important only to white people. And you're endorsed and subsidized only by white people who are the only motherfuckers that can understand the shit anyway. So I say, look, what the intellectuals have to do is they got to strike a midpoint between two extremes. They can't be overly technical when talking about what the black community needs, but they can't be so common as to lack substantive impact in academic debates. But that's only half of the problem, because the biggest problem is commodification or sellout in the black intelligentsia. Will or will they not sell out? Or I call it succumbing to commercial interests. If they do sell out, will they have failed to offer unfettered and probing social criticism? I mean, is it possible for black intellectuals to straddle the fence of emancipatory activism and commercial success? I mean, how can you do that? Well, I'm down for the people, but I'm getting rich as a motherfucker. How do you do that? I'm asking. So it's my view. When black intellectuals basically they go after the bag, that's what they are, then they're not doing what the best and most profound social critics in the black community have done during their tenure that have come before us. MLK wasn't balling out of motherfucking control. You know, I mean, you get what I'm saying. I mean, you had a host of black people who had attained some modicum of wealth, but the goal should not be to get multi-million-dollar book deals and shit, and to appear in movies and shit, or to be on TV all damn day. That's not what your goal is if you really actually are going to be representing the interests of everyday black folks. But maybe that's not the goal. Maybe that's not what you're actually trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to represent the interests of everyday black folks. So sometimes when you hear me talk, I might be a little vulgar, but my vulgarity is just, it's part and parcel of where I'm from. I'm trying to keep my common touch. And you know, look, I think some of the things that the black intelligentsia now are doing is ridiculous. Like, we don't need more books on rap music. We don't need more feminist books and shit talking about how I'm a crunk this or a crunk feminist that. That shit is unnecessary. We don't need black folks to be writing about shit that's gonna make them rich or get paper. Because there's no emancipatory vision that's coming out of that kind of work. I'm gonna tell you what it does do though. And you need to get hip to this thinker, man. I like him a lot. Named Adolph Reed. I know he probably, if he probably heard some of the things I say on this channel, he probably cringed. But I mean, but the idea is, I think he's right on a lot. What these intellectuals are doing is they're selling a representation of black people to white people. But that's bullshit, man. That's like, and Adolph Reed, he wrote a paper called "What Are the Drummers Saying?" What are the drums saying, Thomas? Or what are the drums saying? In other words, interpret what these niggas saying to me. Tell me what they think. Tell me what they feel. And then black people who are intellectual get to write these books and shit, and then white people get to cry and act like they actually did something. That's not fucking helping Negroes, man. But it happens. And then they badmouth black people too. They, like Barack does this shit. He's been doing a whole lot of it lately too. About how black people want the bling and all this shit. That's why they might be attracted to Trump black men. Cut the fucking malarkey out, man. Talk to black people and then you can find out what they actually think, instead of just using the tropes that white people are comfortable of hearing or hearing about. I mean, there is some pathology in the black community. Not to say that there isn't any. There is some there. We should talk about it. But that shouldn't be the primary aim, interpreting what the fucking drums are saying for some white folks for some money or critical acclaim. What we need to be doing is identifying and examining structural and relational forms of domination and oppression, and explaining how domination and oppression generate the kind of pathology that's found within marginalized communities. But now you got intellectuals, they offer up mass consumer hip hop culture and a whole bunch of shit. So ultimately, I am done with mentioning my breakdown. So for the most part, I didn't. The black church, I didn't put up the slide at the right time. But ultimately, the black church, it doesn't stand at the center of black life anymore. It's lost its moral power through too many scandals. Uh, Also, I think that what's deplorable about the black church is that it is almost like new wave psychology as opposed to prophetic wisdom. Like, I claim it and you can have it. Some fucking bunch of bullshit. It's like The Secret, the law of attraction or something. That's bullshit. Nobody wants to go to church and be told, well, I just want a big ass steak. And then it just magically appears. What the fuck, man? The law of attraction? I mean, it's one thing to tell people to think positive. It's another thing to be engaged in new age psychobabble. All right? And then, again, black intellectuals, either you're going to be able to talk to black people in a language that they can understand, or you're going to not be able to resonate with them. And then also, if you're a black intellectual, you got to be careful and not sell out and try to get money and acclaim for basically interpreting for white people what Negroes are saying and what they're thinking and feeling. Either you're going to help us or you're not. Either you're going to chip in and do something substantive in order to ameliorate our condition, or you're going to continue to profit off black folks' misery. What you going to do? So that's my assessment. That's my analysis. I done went an hour and 12 minutes. I'm going to give you an opportunity if you got any questions about what I said, you got any comments about what I said, you can come in and say something. And if you don't, I'm good with that. Thank you, T Fitness for You, for the donation. Thank you, Counselor Murray, for the donation. And tonight I didn't go off on a rant and rave. I just wanted to give you some information tonight. And I'm comfortable with that. I know when I curse people out, I get a lot of money. But it's not all about cursing people out all the time. It's about imparting information. And if you find the information, to be useful or valuable, I would encourage you to invest in the channel. I would encourage you to invest in the channel. And I don't feel ashamed about saying so. So I'm gonna go on a break, and if nobody comes in within the time frame from which the break exists, and the little commercials I got, I'm about to be up out this thing. So quick commercial break. I encourage you to come ask questions, because some of the stuff I said could be a little bit complex, but I know y'all with it. I know y'all can get it. So I'll be right back. The content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. All right, I'm back. I thought I was back and I was talking, but apparently I had a technical difficulty right there, a little faux pas. But anyway, I'm back. Um, I've given you the opportunity if you wanted to come in and to make a comment or to ask a question. I see I don't have any takers right now, but ultimately, man, um, black liberals, black conservatives, Afro-Centrics, the black church, black intellectuals, they're all doing a terrible job at making black people's problems tractable. We need to do better. We can do better. I have some suggestions on how we can do better. And I'm going to, I think tomorrow, offer what I think we need to be doing. Until that time, peace out. I'll holler at y'all next one.
I know you play a haters gon' hate, cause I'm
Okay, well, hold on. We got eye care. I was about to get rid of it. What's up, eye care? What's going on, brother?
Man, what's up? How you doing?
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing excellent, man. Congratulations on the show.
Oh, man, thank you, man. I appreciate it, brother.
Man, your growth, man, is I really love listening to you, man.
Hey, man, thank you. I thank you, man. I appreciate that. And thank you for being a member of the Green Gorilla channel. I see you, man. I talk about you every time I come on the show. I say your name.
I appreciate that.
But you got any questions for me, man? You got anything
No,
you'd like to know?
yeah, the only thing about the Afrocentricity part, you
You
know what I'm
okay?
saying, about
Talk to me.
equated to black romanticism.
Yeah, I get
I
you.
I get that. I understand the black romanticism though, but I just think that Afrocentricity it was a little the definition, was a little diluted, because Malaf Maleficent, man, he talks about the different stages of consciousness for one thing, right? So, being black is like the basic, is the first level of consciousness, and that's one of the issues that many people have. They just see the color and the color and not really, saying what more, the next, not the next level, which is like language, right? So just based on feeling that you're black just because of the color, saying I think that's kind of where it stuck, where the black romanticism kind of sticks at.
Now look, let me make it clear, just so people aren't confused about my viewpoints about this. So I don't think there's anything problematic with black people in America
Yeah.
studying ancient black civilization. They should. I mean, white people do it all the time. They study ancient Greek and Roman culture all day, every day. There should be a commensurate set of study that black people do about
Yeah.
Africa and African civilizations. I think that work is important. And I think black people should be doing it. But I don't think that black people should be doing that work in such a way that, all of a sudden they become mired in it and they can't utilize it contemporarily and make stock and make it or process it in such a way that it will have some sort of tangible output or impact on their contemporary problems. Like just putting on dashikis, calling ourselves, a certain kind of name, or
Yeah.
an African name like Mwala, or adopting Kwanzaa. That's not going to help
Yeah.
us. It's not going to help us. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand the axiology or the value
I agree.
systems are necessary, to some extent. But like just having people wholeheartedly adopt what's alien to them and foreign to them, that's not going to make black people. It hasn't worked, so I don't think it will work. But what we can
Yeah.
do is study that. We can study these civilizations and work with their philosophies and their institutions to some degree. But we have to be able to shape them into what's useful for us, not just all of a sudden we're just going to do a whole lifestyle 180 and then all of our problems presto change or solved. That's not going to work.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right. So that's the only thing I'm saying. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree. It's just yeah, I agree though. But the Afrocentric, saying paradigm basically is just simple that there was a time in existence where black people lived before the European,
oh, for
right?
sure. Oh, for sure.
So that's just the bottom line to it. That's the good and the bad. Like you know what I'm saying? So just that's why I had a problem with the black romanticism because before the before the white guy was here, we were still doing bad stuff, doing good stuff, so-called bad stuff, so-called good stuff, right? To each other and to other people. Right.
Exactly.
So that doesn't debunk none of that. Now I do understand what you're saying about as far as people looking at it and they only want the good parts of it because they never really understand what that entails. I mean, like what can that there can in their minds there's not a life they live so much in the present that there's not a life that they can imagine when there wasn't any Europeans around,
This is
right?
true. So I get that part. I get that component because black people, they had their own institutions, they had their own value systems, they had their own precepts and ideals, they had their own gods, they had their own language, they had their own ways of doing things prior to their contact with white folks. And so that demonstrates that black people are able to live, to function, to thrive, to flourish apart
Yeah,
from being so-called civilized by white people. I get
yeah,
that. Okay. But what I think that's important that you just said, and it was dope that what you just said, was look, all just because black people had their own institutions doesn't mean they were perfect. And
yeah,
it doesn't mean that, there wasn't some pathology exhibited by Africans.
yeah,
That's the only thing. Another thing that I'm worried about is that we think that there was no conquering happening, no war amongst Africans. There was. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Was there no exploitation amongst people from Africa? Yes, there was. Did they
yeah.
infight? Yes, they did. So I mean, the very idea that things were like coming to America like this or Wakanda. This is some fucking mythology, man.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
Well, and to me, man, in my opinion, it's that Eurocentrism, right? It's because the way they teach 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 themselves and have taught in the world is that everything is black and white, right? So, and black is evil and white is good, and basically that's what they're suggesting to the world, and it's saying that if you're not on this side, then you're on that side. You know, what I'm saying that it's not. You know, what I'm saying everything is about saying these two choices about good and evil, and that white people all their success stories even in their bad stuff it was still good. It's done for a good reason. Like what I'm saying they have through their whole mythology they still they worship other gods. They do all this kind of stuff, but it's always in a classical point of view, right? So it's that's the seat of romanticism, which is Roman
Well, and I
ideology.
mean it that way, but not exactly that way. So what I don't want to do is imply that I'm talking about Rome. But even today, like
I know.
romance is looking back at Rome and seeing that it was perfect or that somehow it was an exemplar. People do this with Greece also. Like
Yeah,
Greece was so fucking perfect. Greece had its own problems. They had
yeah,
internecine warfare amongst themselves. So
yeah,
there had never been ideal conditions in any culture or any society.
yeah,
You're never going to find perfect or ideal conditions to obtain anywhere. There are always going to be problems. Okay, so I think we should study, and I preface my comments by saying, if you recall, and
yes, you did.
yeah, I say, look, I know there's a dearth of you know, a dearth of scholarship on black ancients. And I
Yeah.
think that's owing to Grecophilia and the worshiping of Rome, as if as if they would like the model civilizations. When if you look at antiquity, I mean, Egypt or Kemet, if you want to call it that, uh, it was more central or more impactful than either Rome or Greece during that time, right? You
Yeah.
also had Persia, Babylon. You had a whole host of civilizations that existed alongside that of Greece. And Greece wasn't as major a player as people make it out to be. It's something that Western white people that they emphasize, but it's what they choose to study. And I say black people should study African civilization, but they shouldn't study it in such a way as they become to where they become absorbed by it, and they become so entranced by it that they can't think for themselves. That's the only thing I'm saying. So
I agree. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You kind of went
Yeah.
you had
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. And the way you explained it, man, I understood it. I understood how it was, though. I just felt like, I just wanted to explain it because so many times we hear this, people idealize the whole concept of whether it's Pan-Africanism or even Afrocentricity, which I hardly ever hear people talk about actually, but they're usually referring to some form of Pan-Africanism, right? And
right.
they're even in their critique, they're romanticizing
Well,
that that concept. You know what I'm saying? And that's just part of the way we learn to kind of like process information, you
right,
know. And the
right.
whole idea of alphacentricity is trying to rearrange the way you process that information, rearrange that information. People like it came up in the comments about somebody said where about talk about the Native Americans, where the Native Americans black or what or not. You know what I'm saying? And the concept of Afrocentricity, like yeah, you might state that the cultural influence comes from where? This is where the cultural influence comes from. And the original people may have been there, but doesn't mean that they're the only people that was there. Doesn't mean that it's just saying that prior to a certain time, you can exist by yourself. You can relinquish whether you're a black conservative or a black liberal. You still identifying with the concept of with this being here with this person, right? And you can look beyond that. You might have to do that as a function because we have to live in this world. You know what I'm saying? And you have to politic with other people.
I hear you. I got some
But your
other people that want
mindset,
to
your
join in on the
cultural
conversation, my brother. So I'm gonna have to.
can exist beyond that scope of thinking. But I appreciate you, man. Doc,
Appreciate you also, my
doctor,
brother.
you know what I'm saying? I don't want to take up your time, man. And thank you for taking my call. And you keep pushing forward, man. If there's a solution, you're a part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, man. Take care, brother. All right. Before I got the Akan tribesman, and he's on the stream. But before I get to him, I want to say Ahmad Mansour. I want to get you on, but I can't get you on because your device is not connected. So you're gonna have to either connect your microphone or a video connection so that I can bring you up on the show. Right now, you're in the back stage area, and I can't bring you to the fore because your device is not connected. And that again, that message is for Ahmad Mansour. Mr. Akan tribesman, how are you doing this evening? What's going on?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
I am not bad at all. I'm calling from Ghana,
How are you, Mr. Akan tribesman from Ghana? What's
West
going on?
Africa.
How are you?
Not bad at all. I listen to you a lot, and I appreciate what you do. There's another good gentleman in your chat who I listen to. It's called, I think, BGS,
Yes, sir.
and I think that your knowledge is very important. The only problem we have is that your audience is mainly American, and most of what you say would also be important for the African continent, because a lot of our people are still sleeping, especially in regards to decolonization and what effect it have on us, especially also the Roman Church. Right now, it's getting worse because poverty is increasing. The church is also being set up in every corner. So on a Sunday, the whole country is like noise. You see. So
Yeah.
what you teach is very, very important, because what I think you should do is that you and someone like BGS, you should have your American channel and also create an African channel to deliberate with African scholars or African intellectuals, so that we'll be able to also know a lot of this colonizers' intentions and things, which is having an adverse effect on us. Because I mean, we've got resources and everything, but most of it is not being used on the African continent. I mean, look at Nigeria the other day, SARS, where people are screaming and shouting because of what the government is doing to the people. You've got all the resources, but you can't use it on your own people. So I believe it's just a thought that maybe you can create an African channel. And there's only one person in Ghana who's doing it. There's a doctor called Dr. Obadele Kambon. He's at the University of Ghana, and he's the only person that I know that is doing something that you lot do. So it's just a thought that maybe you can have an African channel and start something with us as well, because your knowledge is very important. It's not only for Americans, but I think it will do a lot of good for us as well, because a lot of us do not have this information at all. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Akan Tribesman. I appreciate you for coming and dropping in and listening on the channel, man. I appreciate you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Bye.
Yeah. So, look, one of the things that I try to do, even though what I don't want to do is to be inauthentic in the kind of conversations that I have and the kind of connections that I have with any group of people from anywhere, right? So whatever I do, it has to be authentic. And I personally, I've written several papers on Africa, and we've talked about, and I've done this in conjunction with African scholars, right? So it's not just me writing these papers, but I write them in conjunction with Native Africans, because I think that there is a shared historical fate between African people and Black Americans, if only because the genealogical roots that Black Americans have with people from Africa. But also, I think that you know our fate is also interconnected in that the extent to which Africa is or is not successful continentally in being a world player is going to have an impact on how we're treated throughout the world. So that's so I encourage, if you know anybody from Africa who would like to have conversations of an intellectual kind and who would like to get into contact with either BGS or I would encourage you to get them into contact with me. You got my email, G with a PhD at gmail.com. You can email me and we can start that dialogue. So, and by the way, so there are people asking questions. Members of the Black clergy, who exactly are you speaking about? I'm speaking about, so there's a question in the chat. Please define Black clergy. Who exactly are you talking about? I'm talking about the average Joe preacher in Black America who preaches on Sunday and who has his own church, who has his own flock, and who doesn't get too involved in social and political issues, but has sermons about personal salvation related to going to heaven, or who has conversations directed towards individual improvement, but they don't engage in collective Black political activism. At one time, the Black church was the backbone of the Black community. It was the Black public. At the current moment, the Black church is peddling New Age, law of attraction thinking. Many of these people, it's about getting money and having earthly rewards or having otherworldly rewards. as opposed to engaging in collective political activism for the embetterment or the empowerment of black folks. So that's what I'm talking about. That's what I mean. And I don't mean to be disruptive or because I'm indicting everyone. I'm indicting everyone. I'm indicting the left, the right, Afro-Centrics, the black church, and black intellectuals. I'm saying we're all failing, myself included. So we're not doing what's needed or what's necessary or requisite to improving the condition of black folks. So that's what I'm talking about. And I don't know, brother. There was a brother, Ahmad Mansour. I did see your question, and I got to scroll back up to the chat in order to see it again. And I'm going to try to take a stab at answering your question. And then I'm going to get up on out of here. I'm looking for it right now. I'm scrolling. You said, question, where do you put postmodernist or postmodernists like BLM and Kenji, anti-racists, who are deconstructing a structure? Well, I don't think they're actually deconstructing anything. That's the problem. And this is a reference to black intellectuals, I believe. I assume that the question is related to black intellectuals, right? But first of all, we have to define what postmodernity is, right? Postmodernity refers to a movement across philosophy in the mid 20th century, across philosophy, arts, architecture, and criticism, and it makes a departure from modernism. Okay? It's supposed to be an era that follows after modernity. Now, oddly enough, one could argue that postmodernity initially is architectural. And oddly enough, the very moment, and I think I need to do a show on this, you would be surprised. I guarantee you, if I were to ask the question and I gave you 50 minutes to answer it, but I'll give you 1 minute. I'll take a pause and I will ask any individual here, what is the moment in the mid 20th century or in the 20th century, what moment actually marks the beginning of postmodernity? And I'm going to give you a minute to answer that question. I'm going to take a break real quick. I want to see if anyone can actually answer that question. I wish somebody would be able to answer this question. And I'm waiting. And then after this, I'm going to go, though. I'm waiting. It has something to do with a city in the Midwest. Well, I'll just come out and say it. Some people argue that postmodernity comes in an architectural movement, but that it finds its end in the death knell to the Pruitt-Igoe housing project in St. Louis, Missouri. So So modernism was a movement within architecture, okay? And during the height of modernism, right, you had like an innovative collection of what they call residential towers. Some people refer to them as projects. It was meant to be a representation of the triumph of rational architectural design over the ills of poverty and urban blight. So they were rationally put together. They were put together to be efficient, rational, functional, practical. But one could argue, right, the fall of the Pruitt-Igoe project came to signify not only the failure of one public housing project, but arguably the death knell of the entire modernist era of design. So you first get post-modernity with the destruction of the Pruitt-Igoe projects. And then some people say that, this kind of leads to the establishment of post-modernity itself. All right. But of course, you're talking about philosophical post-modernity, but I thought that would be of interest to you. But some people say Lyotard, it's a French or a continental philosopher. I tend to think, post-modernity gains popularity in the 1980s and the 1990s. That's when you start to see it, right? So you get people like Derrida, Jean-François Lyotard, Frederick Jameson, and there's nothing central about it. I mean, it's kind of like all over the place, but it's skepticism about the ideologies of modernity. And I also have my own critiques about modernity. I have my own postmodern critique. And I do think modernity is flawed. But I don't buy into Ibrahim Kenji's understanding of racism, because I think that, look, race is real. The impact of race is real. We can't just imagine it away. We can't just wish it away. We can't, and the concept of reverse racism and how black people can just, be equally as racist as white folks, I find that to be problematic. Can black people be prejudiced and hateful? Yes, they can. But can black people's racism have the kind of impact that white people's racism can have? Hardly. When white people don't like you, you die. When black people don't like you, you go home, and you go swing the golf clubs. There's a difference qualitatively there. But I think that there was a whole host of philosophers who basically thought that we were actually getting to the point where race would be eliminated. Like there would be no more racial problems, no more interracial problems. They would, progressively become less and less. But we don't see that occurring. And so there are racial realists or Afro-pessimists. I'm not as pessimistic as the Afro-pessimists, but I mean, there are people like Derek Bell who says, look, this racial problem is not going to go away. You can have all the Obamas, Kamala Harris as you want. The problem of race is still here. We haven't dealt with it. And we're not going to deal with it if we continue to do the kind of things we're doing. It's just not over. Right? And so, yeah, I have my issue. And, I do think there's a problem with modernity because I don't subscribe to modernity. I think they're wrong. But I think the way to replace it is not through, this high-minded idealism about, Marxian theory, because I'm not a Marxist either. Although I do, I like some of Marx's thought, but I don't like his, the way that he tries to solve the problems. I don't. So it is, like the end of modernity is Pruitt-Igoe, the housing projects in St. Louis. So I got John reads too much. Shout outs to Dr. Kevin Cosby. I think his civil engagement can set a new standard to how Christian churches function. ADOS, much love to this program from Chicago. Thank you, John Reeves, too much. And I like Kevin Cosby, and I like those people who use the church as a form of civil engagement. I do like those. There are preachers in the black church who are about that kind of ministry, but far too often, look, anybody can get a damn divinity degree and declare themselves to be a preacher, and it's a shame. We don't need more churches. If anything, what we need is, some sort of order or structure and organization of all these churches so that they can provide some resources for black folks and to provide some structure for black folks. But that's not occurring. And I think you're right, Ahmad Mansour. I like Marx as a heuristic, but what I don't like about Marx is that he divides the world into good and bad related to the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. He sets up a dyad. And as far as I'm concerned, oppression is way more complex than carving out oneself as being oppressed, the other person as oppressor, and then, working from that paradigm. That's like Zoroastrianism. That's like Pythagorean dualism. It's a bad idea. I don't like it. And it's too easy for you to use Marxian analysis as a means by which to otherize somebody that's not in your demographic. And I don't like it. I don't like that aspect of Marxism at all. I don't. But anyway, that's my contrived responses to your questions. Thank you for participating tonight. I appreciate y'all for joining me. Tomorrow, I might come up with what I think the solution is, but I would like to have you back on, Ahmad Mansour, to ask your question in further detail in case I missed what it was you were talking about or discussing. But that'll have to be another day. So, at any rate, man, this is the Green Gorilla Channel. I'm the G with a PhD. Now I'm actually officially about to get up out this thing. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.
Yeah. I'm a phenomenon, I shine like Orion. I came in a rap gang to smack it up like Heron, transform it like Megatron. Wait, like Yamatron, most rappers are some peons. I'ma starve them like Ramadan, I'm troublesome. You don't really want no troublesome, cause I pop guns like hood chick, do bubble gum. I been dumb, gon' stay that way till kingdom come. When the sun I'm at, unleash a demon, a polygon. I'm heavy, son, got more knowledge than Farrakhan. More gang than Cap, comma that bitch, some name done one. Stay lit off some Shandan, maybe about they rum. Stay drink to some Nordstrom, call me that Dapper Don. More violent than Genghis Khan, the members of Taliban. Niggas faker than silicon, get hit like a .com, like soldiers in Lebanon. I'm bringing that red rum. When I get through with you, son, you gon' think I'll see rap. I carry weight like a heavyweight, bake more cakes than patty cake. Watch the fiend salivate. You a lightweight, bantamweight. Better contemplate. If you violate, make you levitate to the pearly gates. I fascinate when I conversate from the show me state where these niggas love to hate and hot murder rate or the waste. But this flow is just a taste of God's grace, shining this light in the ugly place. In the prophecy, got more wisdom than Socrates' philosophies. You don't really want no parts of me, can't you see? I'm slicker than Mephistopheles, stronger than Hercules, more dangerous than Damocles. The MCs trying me pretty please. I wet up they white tees, knock them out they wallabies. Now they touch my deliries. For coming up shorter than little C's when I break out the killer bees. I study music like Karkasi, hit chicks look like Ashanti. When I'm breaking them off, they yell at odd poppy. You rack rappers is sloppy, you can't stop me with that. We can sorry, copy, malarkey. I'm a monster like Frankenstein, rock harder than Palestine. You slimes, dropping dimes, a snake and serpentine. Can't stand to see me glow like Nas with his big shine. All you haters colder than cold sores, need calamine. But my hot shit like red brick hitting your head. Leave the sour taste up in your mouth like lemon heads, like Simply Red. Wasted some years up in the feds when I touched down. Already red, that gave me head. I got higher vision for higher living. I'm highly driven. I'm acting women like it's some sort of sick religion. Driving an Impala, sitting on it, each 20 inches, and they spinning just like the planets in the solar system.
Black country people, over in Africa, down to America. Black country people, we make all the world go round and around, yes. Black country people, up in Canada, down to Jamaica. Black country people, we make all the world go round and around.
You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla Channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.